Welcome to the first video of my modding 101 tutorials for Starbound. So, today we're just going to talk about the very basics of Starbound modding, just to kind of give you a feel for what it is and what you can do. We're going to talk about what modding is, and then what in Starbound can I mod. We're going to talk about what the Starbound Log is. You're going to use that a lot for debugging your mods. And figuring out what's wrong with other mods that you might download. And then we're going to talk about some of the tools that I use for modding. So, first of all, what is modding? It's essentially just changing assets within Starbound, changing the game with your own code, with your own, adding in your own stuff. Basically, it's really cool, and the Starbound devs have done a really good job at making sure that modding is accessible and it's easy, relatively speaking, once you get a little bit familiar with what you're doing. But we're gonna help you out with some of that today. So, what game files can I edit? Well, first of all, we need to know where the game files are. So we're gonna pop open Steam. If you go to Steam, go to your Steam library, go to Starbound, right click Starbound, and go to Properties, and go to Local Files, and then click Browse Local Files, and that'll pop up with the Starbound files there for you. So once you've got your Starbound files open, I've just got a shortcut right here. You can go to Assets. And first, when you go to the Assets folder, there won't be anything in any of the folders. That's because all of your assets are packed up in this packed.pack folder. Now what that means is all of the game files, there's a ton of them and they take up a lot of space. So what the devs have done is they've compressed them all down into one file, one big condensed file that the computer knows how to decode and read, but we can't do anything with it until we unpack them. Now there's a tutorial on the forums that I will link to in the description. I won't go over it now for the sake of time, but it's actually by Sexual Rhinoceros on the forums. It's called How to Pack and Unpack Your Pack Files or something to that effect. But it's very good. It's very easy to do. But he explains it very well on the forums how to pack and unpack your files. And again, I'll link to that in the description. So I've already unpacked mine, so we'll go into test. This is the folder that I unpacked it into. And we'll go and take a look at the files. There's two different kinds of game files, and we'll take a look at that here. So we're going to go ahead and go to Monsters. And it looks like there's a lot of different files in here, but really, like I said, there's only two different types of files. There's one type that's called JSON, and anything that doesn't end in .lua is typically a JSON file. So colors.config, that's a JSON. Nightcolors.config, that's a JSON. You can even look in the Crystal Boss folder. .monster type, that's a JSON. .animation, that's a JSON file. So what JSON stands for is it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's actually not a coding language, it's a data interchange format, which basically means it's just a fancy way of storing information for these items in the game that are both easy for people to read and easy for computers to read. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of these JSON files. So we'll look at the monster type file. So this is just a whole bunch of data that the computer stores in these files that it can pull out when it's creating this object or this monster or attack or whatever it is it's making. It can look at this data and say, okay, these are the values that I'm going to have for this, in this case, monster. So for instance, we can take a look at this. Gravity enabled, that's pretty self-explanatory. Is gravity enabled for this monster? It's false, because if you remember, the Crystal Boss is floating in the air. It doesn't fall to the ground. So that's what determines that. And it's just a whole bunch of stuff like that, you know, a bunch of names for a variable and then a value. A name for a variable and a value. Just like, you know, run speed, that's how fast it runs. Walk speed, that's how fast it walks. In the case of the Crystal Boss, that doesn't even have any effect because it doesn't run or walk. But for other monsters, that's what it would determine. So that's what a JSON file is. It's just, again, a fancy way of just storing a whole bunch of data. It doesn't actually do anything other than passing these values to other parts of the code. So that's JSON. The other type of code that you're going to be dealing with, you may or may not, depending on how much you mod, is Lua. Now Lua is actually a coding language. It's a scripting language. And what you code in Lua will actually happen in the game, if that makes any sense. So if you want, when you click on an object, you want it to fly up in the air and spin around, that would be done with a Lua script. And there's different functions that you can use in the Lua script, but we won't go too far into Lua because that's a little bit complex for what we're dealing with. So let's go into idle_state.lua. So, again, we're not going to really delve too much into this, but this is typically what you'll see in a Lua file. You'll see functions, you'll see variable definitions, stuff like that, stuff that you would see in a typical script file. And if you're familiar with scripting languages at all, you'll have no problem with this. It's pretty similar to, say, like JavaScript or something like that. So those are the two different types of game files. Those are the two types of files that we are dealing with as modders. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a little sample mod that I have done. This mod, I just call it tech test. All of it does is it makes certain techs available earlier on the ship for you. So I think in this case I've made the boat tech available after the first ship upgrade, or after you like fix your ship for the first time. So what I have here first is a modinfo file. This basically is just a formality, but you do have to have it in your mod or else it won't run. But I think the only two things that you really need are name and version. So you can just take a look at this. This is how it's formatted. You can also find different resources on the forums for how to format your mod info. You need to open it with a bracket, close it with a bracket. And the metadata needs to be within these curly brackets as well. So that's a mod info file. That's one of the things that you just need to bundle in with your mod whenever you make a mod. And then in your mod, if you're replacing vanilla assets, which means things that are already in the game, if you're replacing it or changing it in any way, you need to use the same system of folders. So like, for instance, I wanted to change something about the ship AI. So you need to have it within an AI folder, just like it is in the game files. And then within that, I have this patch. Now in the next video, we're going to talk about patching things, where there's a very good tutorial on the forums. I'll put a link to on basic patching. But we will talk about that a little bit in the next video. So we'll look at this. And essentially, this is what changes. This is everything that my mod is. The operation, I just add. I'm adding something new to a file. The path, this just shows where you want to add that new thing. And then value, this is the new thing that you want to add. So all that this is saying is I'm adding in the AI actions, the third thing within actions, and the tech name. This is what I want to add to the AI folder. I want to add the boat tech to that. And that's all I'm doing with this patch. Again, it may not make sense right now, but we're going to get more into this in the next video. Alright, so the last thing that we're going to look at is the Starbound.log. And this is very important. This is what you'll use to debug everything in Starbound. So this actually isn't within the assets folder. Okay, so you're going to go into your draft storage, and in here you'll see something called Starbound.log. And what this is it's saying everything that the game is doing as it's starting up and initializing things. So you go into there, and it just kind of looks like gibberish. Most of it you don't need to worry about unless you see something. All of these say info on this little part here, but if you ever see anything that says error, that's what you need to pay attention to, because that's when you've done something wrong with one of your mods, or one of your mods that you've installed from somebody else is throwing problems. So let's go in and look at this one. I think I've got an error in here. No, not in that one. Let's look at log 3. Okay, so in here you'll see I have an error. And what this error says is it could not instantiate item Hilotl sub. I'm working on a Hilotl submarine mod. You can actually download it. It's in the mods now. I got it working. Anyway, it's saying that there's no such item, Hilotl sub. Usually it will give you a little bit more information about this. This was a pretty simple error. It's just saying that it was looking for this item and it couldn't find it. Normally when you have a problem like that, it's just a problem with how you named it or something simple like that. It means it's looking for one name and it can't find it. So, and the error could be many different things. And if you ever post for help on the forums, you should always, always, always post what your starbound.log says. Because if you get an error, what most people do is they will post the little window that pops up when you get an error. It'll make this terrible sound and this little white error window will pop up and it has all this gibberish in it. And people usually post that on the forums and say, help me, I don't know what's happening. But that does not help other modders to know what's going wrong. What will really help is if you go to your Starbound log, and for whenever you're posting your Starbound log, you always want to post just the Starbound.log. These .1, .2, .3, these are all the previous logs from other times that you've opened the game. So just pop open your Starbound.log, look for an error, copy the error, and post it to the forums. That's what will really help solve problems. And when you're debugging your own mods, that's what will be of most help. So again, there's a really great tutorial on this on the forums. I'll link to it in the description. That will help you to debug and fix most problems yourself with your mods. Alright, so we've talked about some of the game files. We've talked about the Starbound log. So now what we're going to talk about is some basic tools that I use for modding. The great thing about modding is you can do it for absolutely free. The only tool that I use for modding, other than the Starbound assets in the Starbound game, is I have a text editing program called Sublime Text. And I'll put a link to this download in the description. It's pretty easy to find if you just Google it, though. Essentially, it's just a really simple, or a really nice, more feature-heavy version of Notepad. Essentially, you can open up any text file you want with this, and you can go in and edit things. It's really nice because if you've ever done coding before, with like Lua scripts, it will color the different aspects of the Lua script different colors, so you can keep your functions straight and things like that. But it's a really nice tool for modding. This is the unregistered version. You can download it for free. The only downside to it is occasionally it will pop up with a little message saying you're using the unregistered version. Do you want to register it? I mean, it costs money, so I haven't done it. But I don't think it's even that much money, even if you want to do it. But it's a great program. You can also use things like Notepad++, something that a lot of people use. Pretty much any text editor will work for you. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it. I'll put those links in the description. And that's it for this first video. Thanks for watching, and I will continue with some follow-up videos. Happy modding!